on the recording. Just stopped it. We're starting over. With now a little tangent, extra bonus video of me going, what is she doing with a pickle? Okay, so today, today's video is not going to be short. I'm just putting that out there. If you were expecting something in the 10, 15-minute range, that's not going to be this one, because we have a really big, nerdy subject to talk about today. And we're going to talk about leading questions. And just to give you a quick description, a leading question is a question with an opinion. It has a position. Leading questions are not inherently evil, but they can be very problematic. Like, they show up everywhere in surveys and interviews and regular conversation and political polls. So, but I'm here with Maggie, of course, my fellow nerd buddy.
Hello.
And, why should our viewers or listeners care about leading questions?
What a good question. And like Karen said, this is not going to be a short video because there are lots of reasons to care about leading questions. Number one, because they give you bad data. Leading questions bias responses, and biased responses aren't usable and they're not useful. So you've just asked a question, and because it's crap, you have to throw away all the responses. So that's a bummer. Number two, you lose trust when people feel like something is being prescribed to them, either in the way that the question is asked or in what the potential responses are. For those of us who are maybe a little bit conspiracy minded, it tips people off a little bit to think, like, why are they asking this? What is the purpose behind this? Will this be used in some kind of nefarious way that I don't consent to? And third, you should care because you get asked leading questions all the time. And Karen just shared some great examples of the kinds of places you might be asked leading questions, like political polls, poorly written surveys, Twitter polls, etc.
The internet.
The internet in general.
Your
and
mother.
You need to be able to spot these in the wild.
I love you, Mom. Everything's awesome. Just saying. Awesome. So that is why you should care, because if you're doing this and you think you're getting unbiased data, you're not. So you're wasting your time, and it makes you look bad to everyone you're trying to survey. And we want to help you be able to recognize them, because they can be sneaky. Not all leading questions are blatant, like, well, that's clearly a leading question. Some of them are sneaky. They fit in like emotional words. We'll get into like the nitty gritty of that, but we want to help you recognize them so that when you're writing your own, you can kind of give yourself a checklist and say, okay, am I leading everyone to a certain answer and I don't mean to do that? And when you're seeing other ones in the wild, and you can be like, leading question. So we'd be good at leading question trivia. That should be a game. Okay. So who are we and where can you find us? I am Karen Kelbaugh, and you can find me at heykaren.com. I help small businesses with customer research, and I help nonprofits with evaluation, which is another fancy way of doing customer research. And I totally got this wrong the last time, so I'm going to point this way and see if I am correct. Go.
I'm like, what's over there?
Maggie is one of these two ways.
My name is Maggie Hodgquan, and like Karen, I work with nonprofits and philanthropic foundations around their evaluation efforts and other projects as needed. And you can find me at creativeclarity.ca.
Awesome. So let's get into the fun stuff. Okay. So, leading questions, which again, they are not inherently evil. But like, if you're just having a conversation, like, let's think of a few examples where they're fine or they're innocent, where you're not really trying, like you're having an interview with somebody, and like, say you're a podcast interviewer and you're interviewing someone and they have a really exciting story to tell. And so you're like, what was the most exciting thing about that? And you're like, well, I'm assuming that it was inherently exciting. and I am leading you to tell me something exciting. So it's more of a guiding question that's helping the interview along that you've already agreed to do, right? So it's less about I want your unbiased opinion of what happened. It's we're telling a story together and I'm helping guide you along in that story.
Yes.
So that's one example where it's fine, it's harmless, you're not necessarily doing damage by guiding questions.
Yeah, you might be in the checkout line at the grocery store and the cashier might say, "Are you enjoying this beautiful weather?" When the sun is shining after days of rain. It's not a harmful question.
Right. So it's like not like every time you're like, that was a leading question. You should ask me, how do I feel about the weather today? You know, you can't call them all out. They're not all bad because that cashier is likely not trying to collect unbiased data for a report.
Yes, totally.
They're just making conversation. So there are plenty of situations in our daily lives where we use leading questions in an innocent way and not in a nefarious and sneaky way. Now, granted, you can use them with your kids, like, are you sure that, you know, trying to think of a good one. Like something about brushing teeth and eating vegetables. I'm sure there's a million of them that I use probably every day.
Totally.
Are you sure that you want to say that you said you brushed your teeth? They're like, I'm going to do it again just to be extra sure I got them all. So they can be totally innocent. So we don't want to just badmouth anytime a leading question gets used. But let's go through some examples of leading questions, just some other examples of leading questions that might not be the best use of a question.
Absolutely. And we have some fantastic examples that we've put together from our own experience and from all the corners of the internet. Karen, do you have a favorite you want to share?
Well, there was the one we were doing a little just Googling around and seeing what we could find to find some really good examples. And there was this one. I kind of want to save it.
Okay, save it.
A little bit and start with the do you believe in yourself one first.
Yes.
We tried to get some examples from different contexts, like from like a business to business relationships or corporate and employee relationships, political polls. I don't know if we actually pulled one from a political poll, but
we have a good political one.
Yeah. And then just some other ones that kind of from different contexts that we wanted to pull together. So one that we got, and this was a real one that pulled from the audience that people had seen on, I believe it was a coaching intake form or something like that. And it was, do you believe in yourself enough to invest in your business and success?
Ugh.
I have feelings about that.
Lots of feelings about that.
So so what they are asking is, this one almost kind of like bubbles up as a double too, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because you're saying, do you believe in yourself? Are you willing to invest in your business?
Yeah.
But it's like a solid guilt trip.
Yes. Yes, right up front, it's telling you, like, you know, you join this coaching program and if you don't see the results you want, or if I as a coach don't deliver, I have an automatic out. I'm going to say that it's because you didn't believe in yourself enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're like, and my first gut reaction to that question is, I believe in myself enough to invest in my business, but not with you because you're being manipulative.
Right? Yeah, totally.
So yeah, that's a solid example of you're like, okay, I have more questions for you because this feels slimy.
Yeah.
Another example that we got from like a corporate environment where there's like an employee and there's like a corporate survey trying to gauge, you know, how the employee feels about his or her contribution to the company. And it was like, I know how my everyday actions contribute to the company's overall goals. And you're like, okay, that doesn't feel too bad, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm.
I know or I don't, but who's gonna, like, this is your boss reading it. Who's going to
Yes.
be like, I have no idea how my actions tie into the company's overall goals. Why am I here? There's a lot of subtext in this question. Like, I don't know my purpose in this company. Why should you keep me? Oh, we should keep the people who know why they're here. So it's got a lot of subtext.
Yes, the whole time you're crossing your fingers hoping that it's anonymous and there's no IP address connection or anything like that.
Are they linking this back to my desk? And that goes into, and we were going to talk about this later, but that goes into the whole thing, which is called the Hawthorne Effect, which is people act differently and respond differently to questions when they know they're being watched.
Yeah.
Like, your boss who's in charge of your employment is reading this survey. And so you're going to have a natural tendency to people please and to do whatever and go along with it. You're like, yes, I absolutely know how my everyday actions tie into my company's goals. That's a ridiculous question. Why would you even ask that? So there's that people pleasing element that it's already there. And then when you have the questions that are like, come on, go this way. And then they get data, and even if everyone answered that question honestly, this is the part that kills me. Even if everyone in that company answered that question honestly, that data is still not helpful because they don't know that. There's no way for the people. There's always going to be a few people who are like C, right?
Yes.
There's that. But there's no way for the people administering the survey to really know that that's the truth. Really, because there's that effect of people pleasing and they just want to look good for their boss.
Yes.
Do you want to read an example? I know two.
No, that was
very
great.
Greedy.
No, that was wonderful. Yes, I have some examples up in front of me. One that I think is great for its simplicity is a survey question that says, "You don't smoke, do you?"
You don't do that, do you? There's no judgment.
You don't smoke, do you?
Not any bit of judgment. Oh my God. No judgment.
Yes, when it would be so easy to redesign a question to find out if people smoke or not by just asking them if they smoke.
Yeah, like, how do you smoke?
No, sometimes, blah, blah, blah.
Yes?
Yes.
No. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Super easy.
Without judgment. And of course,
on a real survey.
Yes. And of course, when you say, "You don't smoke, do you?" You're judging people and shaming people from the get-go. And if for some horrible reason you're the survey giver and you're there, hello, Hawthorne Effect, like Karen mentioned, of course you're going to be like, nope, I don't smoke. You don't drink, do you? Nope.
Nope. You're like putting away my pack cigarette. Hiding my...
Not anymore.
Like,
not anymore.
Just quit yesterday. Totally fine. Yeah, it's like when there's that bias and that judgment and that bullying.
Yes.
In the question, it's like it's clear what answer they want you to give. Then you're like, this might be a leading question. What else you got? You got another one?
I have another good one. Again, this one you should be able to spot from miles away. It's a question that says, "I assume you would agree that teachers do a heroic job for our children."
And then the answers would be something along the lines of strongly agree,
yep,
also agree. Definitely
completely agree.
See, those are hard because like you read that and you're like, of course I agree. It's almost like they just get into this ridiculous, redundant, self-pleasing question kind of feeling where, well, yeah, teachers do a heroic, but like, why are you even asking that question?
Yes, and that's exactly one of those times where this red flag raises and you're like, okay, so who's asking this question? Mm-hmm. For what purpose? What are they doing with the data?
Mm-hmm.
Is this, and don't get me wrong, because I truly do believe that teachers are heroic and do a wonderful job of teaching children. But even I, who love teachers, would look at that and be thinking, like, is this from
Why
like
are
a
you asking me this
lobbyer, a union that wants to say, 100% of Americans agree that teachers are the nation's true heroes? Like, how is this going to be used? And so then, and why are they asking it that way?
Yeah, like when there's inflammatory language in there, we did one of the things that we were talking about earlier was how sometimes really people aren't actually out to collect the data. Like they will send like examples of when they will send, you'll get a survey, a phone call, or a survey that's literally just trying to sell you something, and they're covering up their sales call or their pitch by pretending to ask you questions about the topic so that they can tell you about their product. So there's that. And then another one was an example of, political parties or groups, or community groups trying to fire up their base of people by sending out questions that use inflammatory language that they know that they're all going to agree with, but like, yeah. And then they've got data to feed back to them. And it's just, they're using it as a hype machine almost. And they put all that language in there and you're like, oh.
And do we have a good example of one of those questions?
Okay, I have to read this in my best other lawyer voice. I'm sorry, I love lawyers. I live in Texas, but I just pictured this in like a courtroom setting with somebody from a movie. So
I'm ready.
Please forgive me. See if you can spot all the inflammatory language. Like there's emotion, there's extra adverbs and adjectives. They don't need to be in there. What should be done about murderous terrorists who threaten the freedom of good citizens and the safety of our children? You got to say it with an extending.
Yes, every single adjective builds and builds.
Builds and builds and builds. And you're just like, whoa, that was loaded. And,
wow.
It's just a good example of they are leading you to a certain answer. Whether or not it's a question that needs to be asked or not is, like, does this even need to be asked? This question need to be asked? Of course we don't like terrorists. That's like, they cause terror. Duh. Okay.
Right?
We don't have to do this thing where we build and have this question that's like just leading people in a big direction. So those are some, just some big outrageous examples so that we could kind of show you the different gamut of that. But the next thing that we wanted to talk to you about was how to identify them. So we've just given you some good examples of like outrageous questions, but they aren't all outrageous. So we came up with just like a quick 2-question filter or a checklist. Maggie, would you like to talk about that?
Yes, I would.
You have it ready? Or do you want me to start?
The checklist, yes. So super easy. A couple things to keep in mind when you're looking. So if you read a question and you feel kind of unsure about it, or maybe something to ask as you read any question and get more familiar with this. First thing to think, is this question seeding a particular response? So with the one that Karen just mentioned about terrorism, the question is clearly built to get you to say, yes, terrorists threaten the safety of our nation and our citizens and our children. Like Karen said, does that question need to be asked? When I think probably we're all in agreement that terrorism is not good. And like Karen said, probably that was designed to elicit a strong response to feedback to the people who feel that way. So is it seeding a particular response? That's the first question. And the second, is the purpose of this question to gather unbiased data? So by saying, I assume you agree that teachers are heroic or something along those lines, we know just by looking at that question statement that it is not designed to collect unbiased data. A question that was designed to collect unbiased data would lose the word heroic, would ask for, your perspective or feelings, would give lots of options, or would leave an open-ended question where you could share your own feelings and perspectives about the role of teachers.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking the other day about another way of approaching whether or not something is a leading question, like especially if you're writing your own, and most of us, I hope, are not going to have these dramatic, I really want to get this one response out of people kind of questions, because we want to actually learn from our clients and our community members. And it's kind of the way the question I had in my head was, would the person responding feel comfortable giving any answer?
Great.
To this, like if they gave an answer that they knew wasn't maybe a mainstream response, would they feel comfortable based on your question giving any answer that they felt compelled to give to that question without having to get up the courage to say, well, actually, no. Like, do they have to say, have qualifiers before they answer it? But like, so in general, do they feel comfortable giving any answer to that question? To me, helps kind of also look at it from their perspective on the answerer side, and not just the question asker side.
So if we think about that heroic teachers example, if you are given a statement that says, I assume you would agree that teachers do a heroic job for our children, and your response options were to agree or disagree, you are kind of bullied into agreeing, no matter how you feel, versus, if you're asked a non-leading open question about teachers where you can say, the public school teachers I had growing up were wonderful influences on me. I appreciated their energy and enthusiasm. I have some concerns about my children's teachers because blah blah blah
blah blah.
But overall, I'm grateful for them and thankful that my kids are happy at school, or something. You've got the full nuance of a person's own experience, rather than a person sort of having reservations but being goaded into saying I agree because that's the road they've been led down.
Because they'll look bad if they don't.
Totally.
Especially if any of these are in a public setting where you have to answer in front of other people, or it's not anonymous. Sure. Social pressure is like, okay, well, I clearly have to give this answer because I don't want the backlash of not, and even though I have all these other things I would like to say about the topic, there's no spot for that. So how do we improve? We're going to go ahead and give you another example that is a real example from real surveys that currently exist in the world.
And that's all you need to know.
Yeah, and that's all you need to know about that. Anyways, so this one would be an example of a community survey for youth about alcohol and drug use, right? So these are really common. They're all over the country. Communities all over the country use these types of surveys to kind of see how young people feel about alcohol use and all that kind of stuff. So one example of a question that is absolutely a leading question, I put that out there. How wrong do you think it is for people your age to drink alcohol? The response choices for this question, I see your eyes go bugging, are not wrong at all, a little bit wrong, neither, disagree, or like the neutral option, wrong, and very wrong. See if you can spot the bias in that question and those responses. Do you see anything wrong with that, Nikki?
I can't even believe there's a neutral option. I thought you were going to say medium wrong.
I swear there's a neutral one in there somewhere. Maybe there's just like wrong, very wrong, super wrong.
Right, completely wrong, for sure
Undecided. There
wrong.
might just be an undecided. I'm probably
Undecided.
undecided. The good old standby of undecided. So yeah.
Yeah. So from the hopper, it has a judgment, right? How wrong do you think this is? Well, I guess I know it's some kind of wrong.
Right. And then you're the kid, and so this question is being asked of teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I feel for the people who wrote the question. These are people who are trying to honestly to get young adults and teenagers to not drink alcohol. Like that is their goal and their mission. So to them, it feels completely wrong to ask a question that might give the perception at all that they're okay with alcohol consumption.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand where they are coming from when they wrote this. However, it is a totally biased question because it is putting judgment on the kid immediately, even if they have a slightly different opinion. Like even their furthest away is saying not wrong at all. That's the farthest they go away from wrongness about the topic. So Maggie and I also went, so you've got a question, right? We've got a nice solid example of a leading question. How do we fix it? So how would we go about improving it? I was just going to read through some of our ways of looking at it, and then we'll go ahead and apply those to the question. And we did this ahead of time because it took some thinking.
Well, before you even do that,
okay.
Karen,
Yes.
Can I say I appreciate you talking about the intent of the people who wrote this survey.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I just wanted to point out, it goes back to what you were saying. Sometimes it really is egregious. Like sometimes the person writes a leading question with the intent to get like a politicized or a response that leans heavily in one direction or the other.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's a leading question without that intent, but with some blinders on around potential responses and actual youth perspectives. Mm-hmm. So yeah, not villainizing this question or the people who wrote it, but just noting as you, the viewer, are working through your own surveys, be aware of kind of blind spots in your own thinking.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to that one of our little tests, like would a teenager feel comfortable?
Yeah.
But now because they're teenagers, so they do what they want. But the ones that might care what you think are they going to be like, well, everyone else is going to put this, and and they have that extra social pressure, and not that anyone is going to know what their response is, but they might think their teacher's going to read it, and they might think their teacher's going to read it and look at their, and all of that kind of stuff. So that all plays a part. But anonymous or not, would they feel comfortable giving whatever response to the question based on the question alone? So, all right, so how to improve these? That is an excellent point about the purpose. And they don't all, most leading questions, I feel like, are just, we're trying to get a certain answer and we just ask the question that way and we don't think about it. We don't stop to think about it.
Yeah.
We're not all malicious people. So how to improve these? So for number one, I shouldn't number these because they're not numbered. First one, identify the words or the phrases that are biased. So using of adverbs, adjectives, one-sided adjectives, like only using wrong and words that are like wrong and wrongish and wrongness and
heroic,
one way, heroic, super, all those extra adjectives, emotional language, the safety of our, all that stuff, words that imply judgment, and ensuring that the response options are also not leading. So you could have a totally fine question and then your response options are like not at all wrong. You actually have leading responses, so they can go together and work together, or they can work against each other and mess up your question. So just going through the question and right off the bat, wrong. If I was going to circle something, I would circle the word wrong because that implies judgment. And so that's our first problem with that question. Identifying the purpose of the question. Like this is the point. of all of these videos that we're doing, and please start talking because I'm just like, no.
No, this is good. I'm fully with you on the purpose of the question. And I think that people go so sideways in survey writing here that they lose the thread on the purpose, or they try and dress it up or make it academic. But what are you actually asking people? Like, what information are you trying to get out of them? And then how can you ask that in a way that makes sense, doesn't lead, isn't loaded, and still provides you useful information? And yeah, this is a rant for a whole other video, but if you can't justify why you're asking a question or what you're planning to do with the responses, please don't ask it.
Yeah, I have like some a budgeting wizard friend I have talks about like everything you spend money on needs to earn its spot on the budget.
Brilliant.
I feel like every question needs to earn its spot on the survey.
Yeah.
Or in your group of questions, whether it's a survey or just an interview or whatever it is, it needs to have a purpose. Yep. And you need to be able to say what you're going to do with that information. So yes, we could soapbox this all day, but that
we will in another video.
In another video. So much. This is the soapbox. Woo. But it's nice to know is not a reason to ask a question, because that just gives it there. No one's ever going to do anything with it, and now you've wasted everyone's time. Yeah. So knowing the purpose of the question can help you. Like we had to, we're like, what is the purpose of this question with the how wrong, and we drilled down to the purpose. Now, I don't know what their original intent was, but based on my encounter with this question, the main purpose is to know what young people think about alcohol use by people their age. Like, why don't we ask that question? So I have my handy dandy notes here because we wrote them down. So we literally were just like, okay, well, what if we rewrote it so that that's the question we asked? What do you think about alcohol use by people your age?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that feels like it could go either way. I don't feel immediately pushed. And it's hard to eliminate every ounce of bias. Yeah. But you can make it as neutral as possible.
Yes. Yes. You are leaving room for someone to say, I think it's perfectly okay. Mm-hmm. Or for someone to say, oh my goodness, that's awful. Or really anywhere, any of the gradients in between.
Right. And the next one was tricky because we were like, well, you could leave it open-ended, but then, some of these surveys go out to thousands and thousands of kids. That's a lot of data.
Yeah.
So if we were to replace the response options that all say some version of wrong, how would we do that? And so another way to help improve your question is removing and replacing the biased words and phrases with neutral language to create more balance. So we were able to totally eliminate the wrong word, the wrong word from the question, which was awesome. So we're like, okay, we just took it away. We didn't have to replace it anything than just think, what do you think?
Yep.
But if you're giving a range of options, you can't just you have to put something there. And so it's about creating balance. And we were like, okay, so it's not just wrong and not wrong, what are words that are less judgy than wrong, and other words. And the ones that, and again, there could be a lot of different ways to do this, but the ones that we came up with were harmful being on the one end, and we're like, it can't just be safe, right? Yeah. Like, what's an actual antonym or a balance word for harmful? And the one we came up with was beneficial.
Yep.
And we're like, I don't know how many times I see a study. It's like 1 drink of whiskey a day. There's data out there. I'm not arguing about alcohol at all, for the record. I'm just saying.
Yes.
This is a way to approach it. You're like, well, there's medical stuff out there saying that is beneficial, and the opposite of harmful would be beneficial. Now, I know the folks doing the survey are probably not going to put beneficial on the survey for kids, because then the parents would get mad. But anyhow, we were trying to fix the question.
Yes, and again, when we talked through it, we were talking it through with the approach of what response are the survey writers looking for, and what kinds of information could they harness from these potential responses? And so it's pretty obvious that if a large contingent of youth say harmful, you know where they're sitting. But what about kids who might say beneficial and who are like, I'm super stressed from trying to keep up a high GPA and get into a good school and whatever. And so I sneak one of my dad's beers and I'd like drink a beer to fall asleep at night. And to me, it's beneficial because I'm anxious and it helps me be less anxious and it helps me sleep. And again, we're not endorsing this as like a public health practice, but just saying that if you had if you had a high number of kids or an interesting number of respondents choose that, that would be a spot to do some more digging and to figure out, okay, what are the attitudes and behaviors and perspectives there? Because that would inform the work of this entire coalition that wants to see teens and young adults drinking less or not at all.
Right. And so it goes back to the purpose of the question. You know, what are they trying to learn? Are they trying to learn the actual beliefs of the students? Or are they trying to learn the forced beliefs within this certain window of allowed beliefs?
Yes.
Like, well, you're allowed to think these things. If you're out here, we don't want to worry about you. And, you know, like you must respond to these ways versus, okay, so, you know, we got a nice solid group of kids who said harmful, but we've got these other kids, like, you know, 25% who are on the 0 to beneficial. Let's find out why they think it's beneficial.
Yes.
Let's dig. Let's do more research. So it all comes down to, are you just trying to get data to fill in a report?
Yes.
and meet your grant requirements? Or are you actually trying to learn? Don't get me started.
We could do a whole other video about that. Okay, forget it.
Are you just trying to meet your quota? Or you actually want to know what people think about it so that you can learn and help them and, you know, learn from them. You know, I could come up with a million scenarios. We could dig into that, but we won't. We're just talking about the questions today. Just talking about the questions.
I know. Yes.
So hard. Oh my gosh, this is hard.
I'm going down a rabbit hole of, okay, why else would a youth say it's beneficial? Does it have to do with parental attitudes or parental
like coping mechanisms? Like there's so much research to
This is great.
But again, it goes to the integrity of the question and the integrity of the question asker. Think about it from the kid's perspective of, okay, you're asking me to answer within this. Yeah, I've seen this survey a million times. And then they see one that literally gives them the choice. Now, granted, there would still be that suspicion of my teacher's going to look at this and I look beneficial. So there's still always that Hawthorne effect. It's just there when they know they're being watched. But if you gave people the leeway to answer how they really felt, you would learn so much more. So, yes. Yeah. I could go on that for days. Okay, so moving on to other ways to think about improving the question, consider respondent comfort. So this is kind of the one I talked about already, but would the respondent feel comfortable providing any answer? Yeah. Would they, like, I can answer what I actually think, and I don't feel like I'm going to be penalized for that.
Yes.
And also consider using open-ended questions. So if we didn't have to put beneficial or harmful, if it was open-ended, but there would be a lot more data to look through. But that's why you hire people. See? And those were kind of like our main things. Like if you see the questions and you're like, okay, this is probably a leading question. How do I fix it? Find the bias, find the judgment words, do your best to eliminate or neutralize them, and or create more balance in the question. Like if there has to be, do you like this or do you not like this? Like we looked at poll questions and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, you were.
That they were a lot less inflammatory. I thought they were going to be more inflammatory. And a lot of them were, I was like, okay, so the poll people did their work. The reporters, I will save that for another topic.
They must have needed a hook. We could do a whole other video on presenting data with integrity. It's going to be a lot of videos.
We need a lot of soapboxes. I'm just going to find a lot of soapboxes. Be like, okay, today's soapbox. Oh my gosh. Okay, so wrapping this up, I feel like we've covered it pretty well. Is there anything you think we're missing or anything we need to go over again? And again and again.
And again and again. I think we've provided some great obvious examples, you know, where average non-survey expert would read those and think, oh my goodness, this is strong phrasing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've provided some ideas, some questions to use as a framework to figure out if you're being asked a leading question. We've provided some ideas on how to de-lead your questions, to how to make them not leading questions. I think we've left people in good hands.
Excellent. So yeah, the benefits of all this are that if you are trying to get unbiased data and you can keep your questions as neutral as possible, then your data will be useful. You'll be able to feel confident that these people gave you real answers and not just tried to make you happy.
Yes.
And so, which, you know, is good because it's not wasting your time.
Or theirs.
Or theirs. And then you've got data that you can actually use and for whatever purposes, and it's quality data that is actually giving you real information. But yeah, so that was our fun rant on leading questions.
Woo-hoo!
We made it. We
made it. Thank you for sticking with us.
And I think it was less than an hour.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We were fully prepared. We were like, okay, this is gonna go forever. Oh my gosh. We kept it. I was fully ready to just ditch it and go off of like 10 tangents.
Me too, but I just mentally bookmarked them for future conversations.
Yes, later. So again, if you have any questions of what we're talking, questions, haha. If you have questions about our questions, feel free to comment anywhere you see this video, and we will do our best to answer and help you out, absolutely. But if you found this content valuable, so you can like it and share it with anyone you think needs to see it. Like you can, if you like need to send it to somebody who really needs to see it, who's like on a question writing team or something, you're like, hey, they talked about your question in this video.
We hope not, but maybe. And
you should watch this. You can totally do that and just subtly just leave it open on somebody's computer. And
if you are an educated person, you will agree that this needs to be shared.
Are you reading that? Shame on you, woman. That is a leading statement. Anyways, you're going to make them disagree just out of spite. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you would like to keep up with the rest of our video series, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in the next video. So thank you.
Thank you.